안녕하세요. 디파인의 디렉터를 맡게 된 양태호입니다. 오늘 함께 해주셔서 너무 감사드리고요. 오늘 굉장히 스페셜한 게스트 두 분을 모시게 되었습니다. 먼저 제가 간략하게 소개를 드리도록 하겠습니다. 현재 질리안 초이는 잠시 길을 잃고 계셔서 곧 도착하실 예정이어서 양해 부탁드리고요. 일단 제 옆에 계신 닥터 초만님 소개를 먼저 드리도록 하겠습니다. 굉장히 중요하신 스피커고요. 어떻게 설명을 해야 될까요? 정말 문학의 약간 파워 플레이어라고 설명을 드릴 수 있을 것 같아요. 방콕 태생이시고요. 런던에서 자라셔서 법률 교육을 받으시고요. 개발도상국의 지적재산권 섬유산업 분야에서의 박사 학위를 취득하신 굉장히 독특한 경력을 가지고 계신 분입니다. 네, 2010년에는요 주로 영화 제작자, 디자이너, 건축가, 브랜드와 협력해서 창작을 하시고 제작하고 컨설팅을 전문으로 하는 Mysterious Ordinary라는 회사를 설립하셨습니다. 이 회사에서는 정말 다양한 멋진 프로젝트를 진행하였는데요. 그 프로젝트에 대해서는 잠시 후에 조금 더 닥터 초만님께 설명을 해주실 거라고 기대가 되고요. 또 2014년도에는요. 방콕 장인들과 긴밀하게 협력하는 굉장히 멋있는 컨템포리한 라이프 스타일 브랜드 필립 황 NIC의 공동 창립자로서 또 새로운 브랜딩 크리에이터의 역할을 맡고 계십니다. 또한 마지막으로 아까 잠깐 소개해 주신 대로 2023년 방콕 비엔날레의 큐레이터로 참여해 주셨는데요. 굉장히 다양한 활동을 보여주시고 계시죠. 지금 질리안 초이님도 도착을 하셨는데요. 정말 10년 감수했습니다. 네. 네. Thank you so much for coming. 네. 네. 질리안 초이님에 대해서도 잠깐 소개해 드릴게요. 질리안 초이님은 현재 저의 또 굉장히 좋은 친구이기도 하는데요. 세계적으로 활동하는 아주 훌륭한 예술 및 디자인 컨설턴트이자 아주 자랑스러운 친구입니다. 2020년 1월 이제 글로벌 전시 디렉터로 디자인마이애미에 합류를 하셨고요. 현재 또 질리안 초이님은 문화 프로그래밍, 박람회 디렉터, 브랜드 전략, 그리고 브랜드들과의 굉장히 다양한 전략적인 파트너십 등을 체결해서요. 다양한 분야에서 전문적으로 컨설팅 작업을 진행하고 계시는 두 분 다 정말 세계의 아트씬과 디자인씬에서 빼놓고 이야기할 수 없는 파워플레이로서 그 역량을 선보이고 있습니다. 일단 두 분의 이야기가 굉장히 기대되는데요. 닥터 초만님의 슬라이드와 설명으로 이 토크를 시작하도록 하겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Hello, hi everybody. My name is Chomwan. Thanks so much for the introduction, Teo. Thanks very much, Teo, Define Seoul, or Busan, for having me. It's a pleasure. Always wonderful to be back here in Seoul. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction as to kind of what I do, because I think it's a convergence of a lot of different things that somehow has had this ongoing thread that's really been about art and culture. So the most recent project that I worked on was the Bangkok Art Biennale in its 3rd edition. It's a biennale that takes place all over Bangkok, in fact 11 venues. What's really striking about what we did and what they will continue to do is how we use site-specific locations such as, the royal palaces in Bangkok. So you can see there I'm standing with an Anthony Gormley sculpture. I worked specifically with 7 artists, some from kind of all over the world. So the Biennale, the point of the Bangkok Art Biennale was always to create a level playing field for artists from around the world, but also for local Thai artists and artists in the region to be able to have a truly international global conversation in Bangkok. So space is extremely important. The theme was chaos, calm. So if you've ever had a chance to come to Bangkok, I think we really live that definition of chaos and calm. And what I have always been really curious to explore is the space in between 2 binaries. So the little dots over there are really important for me, and I think that's what's really informed my practice over the years. This was the bigger project, the biggest of the projects that I did for the Bangkok Art Biennale, which was with the artist Tom Sachs. So Tom and I built a boat together with artisans from the south of Thailand and as well as in Bangkok. The boat floated on the river for a week, and then after that it went to the museum. We hope to be able to bring it to another river in the future. But that's why it's called infinity. We never really know. So this idea of possibility is really important for me. And how it all started really is I'm actually a lawyer by training. My specialization is intellectual property. My specific area of research was intellectual property in the textiles industry in developing countries. So looking at how IP could be used as a tool to create value and I think a long-term vision for what we still do very much in Southeast Asia, and I believe you share in Korea, which is making with our hands, which is, you know, the artisan. So Tom's boat really kind of manifested that idea. So it all started for me really in 2012. I was working before that in a TV station. It was when I had the wonderful privilege of meeting so many wonderful independent filmmakers, one of whom was 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗚𝗓, who went on to win for Thailand, the first Thai filmmaker to win the Palme d'Or for his film Uncle Bunmi, Who Can Recall His Past Lives. So 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗚𝗓 and I co-curated a film festival at the time with a friend, and we had this naive vision of projecting films on rocks. It was a very simple idea of how do we bring friends, creatives to Thailand from multiple kind of disciplines to not just sit on the beach, but to make things together, to have a conversation and to be drawn to these primordial rocks and, you know, the crystal clear water, but not to have a cocktail, to actually look at how we can collaborate. So we invited 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗚𝗓 and Tilda Swinton to come together to co-curate this film festival for us. And that was the beginning of a long conversation I've had with 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗚𝗓, but also many of the artists who were present. So the idea was for everybody to come and to leave something behind. And in this case, Tilda had curated a program called Message in a Bottle. So people were invited to bring a film that ignited cinema for them, a book that ignited film, and everyone made something. So you can see the actor, Waris Ahluwalia. You might recognize him from some of Wes Anderson's films. He is a strong supporter of craft and the artisan, so he collaborated with the local women, the batik group, and it's a 100% Muslim island. So that was a really beautiful conversation we had. We also commissioned a film director working with the Thai Film Archive to work with the high school to teach. So we were interested to see how an island which was focused on tourism and hospitality can go beyond just offering services. How do you, as a member of the community, convey the stories of your island? And we believed, and we still believe, that film is really one of the most powerful tools to do that. The screenshot, the clip, the photo you see, that was by, at that time she was a 14-year-old girl. She made a little love story about this love triangle. You know, the boy fell in love with her friend. She actually continued to make films after that, and a film made it into, I believe it was the Tokyo Short Film Festival, and she, I think, goes to film school now. So it was really just wonderful to see these sort of projects take light. That was underneath there, you know, and then we projected film. We collaborated with the local village to make a festival, which was also a film screening, Tom Sachs. So this was his first time in Thailand, hence the boat that we made together was a boat from the south of Thailand. So there's all these stories. 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗚𝗓𝗓 is there with 𝗓𝗘𝗙𝗚𝗓𝗓, but this picture is important for me because what we got together was a room full of people who were not just friends, but for me over the last 10 years have become my collaborators. So some of you might recognize this picture. The thing that came to define our film festival was a floating cinema, which was designed by the architect Ole Sharon. So the picture kind of went viral. You know, I think the resort, it was Six Senses Yao Noi who hosted us, still get inquiries as to how they make it to the floating cinema. But the thing is, it was just for one night because of the tide. So you can't have a floating cinema in the middle of the ocean, even though it's protected, and not it being completely destroyed by natural elements. So the next day they had to deinstall it, and people imagine this as like a luxury thing, but actually it was lobster rafts, so it was built by the fishermen. So when we dragged it back to shore, they dismantled it into small little platforms, and one was donated to the school, one was donated to, back to Six Senses. So there was something, I believe it's the first project the architect ever did that as well, that kind of really worked with the local community, because he's known for big high-rises. So that was the beginning of, I guess, the last 15 years, so to speak. I collaborate very closely with the artist 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗓𝗓. He currently has a very large solo show at PS1 in New York, but he also founded in the early 2000s a foundation called the Land Foundation, literally a piece of land in rural Chiang Mai that is an artist village. So there are these experimental structures by many of his friends. So they're designers, they're filmmakers, architects, artists, farmers, and the idea is that the land is there for everybody. It's not owned by anyone, and you can always go back to the land. And it's funny because I only realized recently that this has really been the through line. Being, I think didn't really grow up in Thailand, but being Thai, what we have is, it's actually a very multicultural country, albeit everyone has a sense of a strong identity of what is Thailand, but actually what we have is we have the land together. We grow rice. So a continuation of these projects. What I do, and again, I've only just recently acknowledged that this is such a core part of what I do, and I really like bringing people together in a room. So that idea of convergence doesn't just take place conceptually or intellectually or in an artwork or in an object, but it's in a room. People who typically wouldn't be in a room together. I really love imagining what conversations could happen. And I think that's been a really important part of what I do as a curator, as a producer. This is a project that I collaborated with the artist Co-Curator. He had a show last year at Art Sanjay. He's a painter as well as a filmmaker. So typically, my background is in law, so I don't mind contracts. So what happens is I work sometimes with artists to help with fundraising. In Thailand, we don't have so much public support for contemporary art and design. So a lot of what you see is actually private initiatives. So it's really important to create those conversations for me. So it's a lot easier to have that conversation with a sponsor when you can throw a really good party. And that's not just a party, but an opportunity for them to convey their vision in a room of people who actually might agree, but they don't know because they never had a chance to sit together. So this was a dinner that we did together. Actually, we always use those moments of art fairs where the international art world that already has its ecosystem where they gather to announce projects. So that was a party that I hosted for Co-Curator in Hong Kong at Art Basel, and then that was an opening party afterwards in Bangkok. What you see on the left also is a print, a support print, again, because a lot of this is private initiatives. We find a way to be able to offer access to artists' works. Typically when it's especially bigger name artists where typically there isn't an entry point, point level. So I also did a little stint in hospitality. I became the global brand director for the hotel brand The Standard right before COVID, and that was a really interesting experiment, I think, for them and for me. The hotel had just been taken over by a Thai real estate company with very ambitious plans to expand all over the world. The Bangkok branch of The Standard is actually now in the Mahanakhon building, which was designed by Ole Sharon, incidentally. But what I did when I was there was we really championed, in the DNA of the brand, was support for the arts and collaboration with the direct community which the hotel hosts, which are artists or were artists. So the first project I did was at Frieze LA, with celebrating the architect, the Thai architect 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗚, who at the time designed and continues to design the Frieze exhibitions. And we did a collaboration with a mutual friend of ours, Teo's and Jilian's, Ivan Pan, who's from Myanmar. And we basically did a Burmese restaurant pop-up in LA. So we thought that was it's always interesting to, I think, stir up the narrative a little bit, especially in America, where there is one specific narrative of what is contemporary. So this is something that I really enjoy doing. I don't know if it comes with its challenges, I guess. We did another dinner for Rick Ritt when he did a cookbook called the Boston Cookbook. Interesting cookbook and also art book that explores convergence and the evolution of cuisine and the idea of purity and authenticity of cuisine. Because, you know, when you say something's authentic, what's authentic? We weren't there. Maybe it's written down somewhere, but what does this mean? So that was a project we did together, and I wanted to show this because in a room, I imagine many of you are designers and artists, that idea of convergence. So the last project I did with the Standard was a collaboration with the artists Elm Green and Dragset. They're known for, you know, Prada Marfa, many other site-specific installations, but they did a project in Venice at the Nordic Pavilion some years back with a dead collector floating in the pool. So I said, guys, let's collaborate on something. And they said, let's float dead collectors in the swimming pool. So that's what we did. We basically, they're actually sex toys. So in Thailand, we still produce them. We have actually quite a niche specialization in blow-up sex toys. And we commissioned them to make a dead collector. And we floated them all over the Standard pool, and it became a limited edition collectible as well. So that's kind of funny. So I just wanted to show this. So my conversation with 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗚 is over a decade long. And when he wanted to premiere the film Memoria in Thailand, again, you know, they had run out of a marketing budget. The government weren't going to pay for it. The Thai brands typically are not at a point quite yet where they don't understand that you can't have a superstar like Tilda Swinton posing next to your product. It just doesn't work like that without, you know, a lot of negotiation and fees and endorsements. So we went to Chanel. And this was just a serendipitous sort of, you know, I mean, it's a relationship that's ongoing for me, but Tilda as a Chanel ambassador kind of really embodies that, but also the culture part of Chanel as a brand, and they supported our premiere, which included this beautiful dinner. At the time, it was also COVID, or it was ending, and Thailand had this wonderful sandbox scheme, so you could come and stay on the beach for a couple weeks. So that's what we did. We flew Tilda over, also the team in Colombia, the team of the producer was a Colombian producer. And everyone came to Thailand for the premiere of Memoria. And what I think is important to note in the collaborations that I do with brands is it's not just having the logo on a backdrop and everyone taking a picture anymore. It's a commitment to offering access to the work, to the talent. So it was a series of masterclasses that we produced together with Chanel that, you know, that were just packed out. It was Tilda sharing her experiences, 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗚 sharing his, you know, lots of conversations. And I guess what Teo had mentioned, the kind of big project, I suppose it's the family business. With my husband, we founded a brand together that probably functions more as a platform. This was in 2016. It's a clothing brand, but we specialize in natural dyes. So we work with artisans in the northeast of Thailand making color. So the colors are drawn from plants, from minerals, and the idea is to show the plant biodiversity of Southeast Asia through the use of color. And I think this is something that so that's the other thing. When you work with artisans, there's no exit plan because it's not a charity. What we want and what we hope we will succeed at doing one day is to create a viable business model where what you see is an alternative to what you see with synthetic colors, what you see with things, you know, the notion of value. I think Korea has been really successful. I mean, we use it as a benchmark in Thailand, how Korea is able to communicate Korean craft and how the artisan has a place in kind of the world that's up here and not here. So this is something that I work with. So we work with, so indigo, so I'm wearing, you know, the color, you know, indigo is a 6,000-year-old plant, like a dying tradition. And the fact that it still exists is testament to, I think, its resilience, but also that as human beings, we're also capable of drawing harmoniously from nature. So it gives us a little bit of hope. So this is just a snapshot of the different colors. Like, we work exclusively with natural dyes. So it is indeed possible to create a palette drawn from using nature, drawn from nature in harmony with it. And I just wanted to say, so this picture probably sums up my approach as, I guess, a creative director, designer, producer, maybe even as a lawyer. I believe in that idea of convergence, that people who typically are told that you can't have a conversation together because, you know, it's not going to work out. You don't know until you have it. So I think that that's what Philip and I aspire to do all the time. How do we interrogate, question, and I think ultimately come up with different versions of the narrative. And that's some projects I've worked on this year. Did a collaboration with Valentino, with the Thai artist 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗡𝗙. So that you see there, the breast stupas. So that actually also went to charity. But yeah, beautiful conversation with Pinari and Valentino. The Thai artist 𝗗𝗙𝗙𝗡𝗙. I've been working on a 6-month-long project with him in Bangkok with 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗡𝗙 Foundation. And what you see on the left is just the flyer for a party that we did with my friend Ivan and Jam during Free Seoul to celebrate the Southeast Asia art community. And that's it. Thank you very much.
아, 정말 대단하시죠? 네. 어떠한 디자이너나 아티스트보다도 더 액티브하게 이 시대가 가지고 있는 문제점들, 그리고 이 시대의 사람들이 알아야 되는 동시대적인 이슈들에 대해서 건축, 미술, 디자인, 브랜드, 다양한 도구들을 활용해서 우리에게 많은 질문을 던져주시는 점이 정말 큰 감동으로 다가왔습니다. 굉장히 유치한 생각이지만 잠은 자는지 그런 걱정이 될 정도인데요. 정말 너무 존경스러운 마음이 생기고 바로 막 정말 큰 팬으로서 큰 박수를 보내고 있습니다. 저희 다시 한번 큰 박수 보내드릴까요? 그럼 저희 또 질리안 초이라는 또 멋진 또 디자인계에서 활약을 하고 있는 파워 플레이어 여성분의 또 이야기를 또 저희가 들어보도록 하겠습니다. Thank you, Jilian.
Hello. 안녕하세요. 늦어서 죄송합니다. So I will switch to English. So as Teo wonderfully introduced me, and thank you so much for inviting us here, and Chomwan, it was very calming to hear you. And so I studied art history, and I always say I accidentally ended up in design. I was looking for a job at an art gallery, and I ended up at a design gallery, and that's kind of where my education for design really grew, because as an art history student, I think I took like one architecture class, and you learn about like Gesamtkunstwerk and like furniture a little bit, and I really had no idea, and so I started this work at a design gallery, and I ended up in art PR, and then I ended up back in design, and so my first foray into design fairs, like Define Soul, was collective design, and it was a fair that took place in a new location each year, and it was in New York during May, aligned with Frieze New York. And so we used often industrial spaces, and so this was a collaboration with the Noguchi Museum, and I think we had the top design galleries from all over the world, but we also worked with institutions and also with brands to do installations, and I just absolutely adored this installation from the Isamu Noguchi Museum in Long Island City. And then this was, I also loved, Chomwan talked a lot about convergence, and for me also, as someone coming from an art education going into design, the intersection of art, design, fashion, architecture, film, all of those things very much interest me as well. And this is an artist, Justin Moran, and he works in textiles, and each textile that he does is based on an archival image or a film, and so they're kind of blown up pieces of an image or a film still. And he does these beautiful installations, and they serve as function. Like, you can have them commissioned to be drapes in your home, or they're also art installations. He makes one-of-a-kind pieces. And then this is Objects of Common Interest, a Greek design, and this was actually our VIP lounge that year. And so these are the installations that I really loved, working with like site-specific installations with designers. And through my years at Collective Design, I had just the great fortune of traveling around the world and meeting the best designers and architects. And yes, and this is Harry Nureyev, who's based in Paris now. And yeah, so these immersive installations are always the things that really drew me, and they were always my kind of favorite projects. I ended up, so as Theo mentioned, I do consulting work now, and I've done that throughout, but in 2020, I began at Dijainma이애미, and this year was, of course, it was a COVID year, so this show, which normally takes place in a big tent, we did it in the Moore building, which is a historic building in the design district of Miami, and it was a show that we did against all odds with COVID happening. And because galleries couldn't travel that year, we allowed them, it was the first year that we built a whole e-commerce platform for that. And we started Dijainma이애미 Podium, which allowed designers and galleries to send work, and we would sell on their behalf, so it was a new model. This is just another image from that year, 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗚. And so this is Choi and Friends is my consulting company, and through it is really, I named it And Friends because throughout my whole career I've really collaborated with my friends, with my colleagues, and through that collaboration I find is where the most magic happens, and it's always fun to work with friends. And my first project was really, a friend of mine had a fashion company called Homeism, and she wanted to do an installation with design and art to show her new collection. So again, so a lot of these projects kind of started very organically, where I just, called people that I knew and did a very beautiful, austere installation. And so I'm going to run through some projects, which is just a brief introduction to my work. I also, when Ten Corso Como opened in New York, they have a gallery, as they do here, I think, too, in Seoul. And so I helped them set up their gallery here in New York, which unfortunately no longer exists. But so we set up their photo gallery, and the first show was a Helmut Newton show. So that was quite, it was at the South Street Seaport, a really fun project to work on. And just an example of some other exhibitions that I helped with, Size New York is a platform that a friend of mine started, and he does these beautiful design-forward exhibitions, but of course also mixing art. And I know Define Soul is all about the intersection of art and design, and for me that's also where my interests lie. So I included some examples here, and this was a beautiful show called Industrialism that took place in Donna Karen's space in the West Village in New York. And so again, what I loved about this show was that there were emerging designers, there was historic work, there was like a $500,000 rare Lamborghini, and because cars are also design. And so I just love it when art and design doesn't take itself too seriously, because I think it tends to be in silos, and we tend to, as Chomwan also mentioned, kind of separate things. But why not put it all together? And this was, I think this is the last I have in my, but some other fun projects. I love to also curate shows with friends, and this was a show that was with just Asian American artists, which I also, putting together this show with my friend Karen Huang, it was hard. It was actually hard for us to come. We had to really search for Asian American artists. So, because when I think of Asian artists, I often think of like Korean artists or Thai artists, and so really it was really great pleasure. And this is, of course, familiar scenes, and this is a Vietnamese American artist, Diana Settles. And then this also, again, it's just to have fun with design with the genre and Corbusier table with Stephanie Shi. She's a Taiwanese American ceramic artist, and she makes these household products, or very, you could see a Peking duck, and I think there's some oyster sauce in there, and they're all ceramic works. And again, I think it's also just an example of you can have fun as a, when you're doing projects and you're doing projects with friends, it doesn't have to be so serious. And so I love artists that also, take that to heart. And I think that's the last slide that I have. I kept it short, and brief. Thank you.
짧지만 굉장히 강렬한 슬라이드고요. 굉장히 험블하게 이야기하지만 질리안 초이님의 작업들도 우리가 아트페어를 접하는 방법들, 그리고 아트와 디자인을 접하는 관객과의 어떠한 관계성을 굉장히 많은 바꿔놓는 큰 역할을, 중요한 역할을 하고 계신다고 저는 믿고 있습니다. 그리고 그렇게 또 평가를 받고 있는 분이기도 하고요. 두 분은 굉장히 신기한 게요, 마치 디자인과 아트를 다루는 어떠한 천재적인 재능을 가지고 태어나신 분 같아요. 마치 디자인과 아트에 대한 어떠한 두려움이라든지 선입견이라고는 전혀 존재하지 않고, 아까 질리안 초이님께서도 진지하게 받아들이지 말고 편하게, 캐주얼하게 받아들여라, 이런 말씀을 하셨는데, 그 캐주얼함 안에 어떠한 진리들이 숨어 있는 것 같다는 생각이 듭니다. 제가 두 분께 질문을 좀 할 텐데요. 두 분 다 아주 굉장히 멋지고 매력적인 일을 하고 계세요. 근데 어떠한 점이 두 분을 미술과 디자인에 그렇게 끌리게 했는지, 그것이 굉장히 궁금하고요. 그리고 미술과 디자인은 굉장히 다양한 사회적인 역할이 있습니다. 근데 그 중에서 어떠한 면에 가장 큰 매력을 느끼시는지, 혹은 내가 생각하는 디자인과 예술의 사회적인 역할은 이것이다 라고 정리하실 수 있는 게 있는지 좀 궁금합니다. 네. 저희 질리안에게 먼저 답변을 들어볼까요?
Yes, okay, so I guess I do need the translation. But did you ask what was?
Yes. So what do you think is the crucial role of art and design for the society?
Oh, yes, okay. So sometimes I can understand 50%. Well, for me, art and design has really brought me great joy. And of course, with my love affair started with art and going to museums and also going to galleries, which feel very closed off but are quite accessible. And so for me, that like feeling, that like nukim you get from just seeing a piece of work that moves you, or where you feel seen or understood. And I think that it's like when you read a book or you watch a film and you hear your story. And for design, design is something we touch every single day, you know, whether it's a doorknob, whether it's the cup that you're holding. And so it carries so much importance. And I think everything is design. And so good design and good architecture, it really is, and good is of course also subjective, but being, you know, in a place where you're comfortable, or a seat that's comfortable, is how much of our lives do we spend sitting? And for me, like having small objects that have been made, that have the touch of hand, is so humanizing in a way. In a world where we're very busy and running around and not noticing the details, to know that someone spent time with the details, I think is very touching for me.
닥터 초만님은 어떻게 생각하시는지. 미술과 디자인을 정말 자유자재로 다루시는 것 같아요. 그 점이 굉장히 신기한데요. 미술과 디자인의 어떤 점이 그렇게 매력적이신지 좀 궁금합니다. Did you get?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, the importance of art and design. So I think that, as Jillian mentioned, it's all around us. So you know that saying, once you see, you can't unsee. So the moment you kind of acknowledge that so much work has been put into creating the environments where, you know, whether it's, I don't know, the train station, the mall, the restaurant, any public space, someone's actually thought about creating that space for you to use. I think that that's, as Jillian said, design is all around us. But once we see that there's been that process, I think that where, for me, and this is where the convergence, that's why I love this art plus design thing, it gives the art aspect, once you see that it's all, we've made it as, again, the positive side of what we can do as humans, art gives it another layer of, I think, depth. I mean, it's nice to also have humor, but I think certainly where we are in Southeast Asia, where contemporary art is still new. You know, in Thailand, the art school is 120 years old. Art gives a touchpad for people to understand other conditions, other people's stories, and you know, and there's certain feelings like love, sadness, anger, we all have in common, small feelings. But then there's bigger stories that touch upon, you know, our family histories, our histories, other histories that we don't ever get to see. And I think that that space, the design space that's well designed, where you're comfortable, can hang out with your friends, have a conversation, I think those are, like, it's really culture and how we want to spend our lives, I imagine sometimes.
너무 좋은 답변 감사드립니다. 제가 항상 궁금한 점이 있는데요. 세계 무대에서 아시아 아티스트들과 아시아 디자이너들의 위치는 다른 느낌을 가지고 있는 것 같습니다. 예를 들어서 아까 함께 작업하셨던 닥터 초만께서 함께 작업하신 태국의 아티스트, 태국의 감독들도 우리에게는 굉장히 익숙해요. 그리고 이번 프리즈 때도 그 신세계 분더샵 갤러리 지하에서도 굉장히 그 태국 작가님의 큰 이벤트가 있었고 많은 분들이 그분의 작품을 보기 위해서 몰렸는데요. 그에 비해서 태국 디자이너들은 우리가 많이 접하기 힘든 게 사실입니다. 근데 이것은 비록 태국의 문제만은 아닌 것 같고 아시아적인 문제라는 생각이 듭니다. 우리가 우리 한국을 빛내는 굉장히 많은 아티스트들이 있죠. 이호환 선생님부터 시작해서 뭐 박소보 선생님도 계셨고 좀 더 어린 세대를 또 이야기하자면 양혜규 같은 작가님도 한국을 빛내는 작가분이신데요. 그에 비해서 디자이너들은 그만큼 아시아인으로서의 어떠한 확실한 자리를 만들지 못하고 있다는 혹은 그 비중이 적다는 생각이 드는데요. 그거에 대해서는 좀 어떻게 생각하시는지 두 분의 의견이 좀 궁금합니다.
So this is definitely something that I think about a lot, especially growing up in the U.S. and getting an arts education of the Western canon. And there's so much that it's so funny because recently I just found a notebook from college. I studied art history, and it was the one Asian art class that I had to take. We started from all the way, ancient Chinese, and I remember learning about Koryo ceramics and Celadon, and it was such a small slice of my education. And I remember, seeing as I, traveled around the world and seeing other Korean artists, as a Korean American, I didn't really know that there were even Koreans that were living artistic lives. And I think that's an issue of partially the education system, and then also all of the design schools and art schools are often in the West. What I think is really, I think that's a beautiful thing about the internet and social media, where designers and artists from all over the world can really get exposure in a way that wasn't possible before. That being said, I think some of the most interesting things are happening in Asia in terms of art and design. And even in Seoul, for instance, I think there's so many incredible Korean designers working today. And for me, what I find really special and interesting, and even with the Thai artists and designers or crafts, I think it's also the differentiation between craft and design is also very much a Western thing as well. But in Seoul, for instance, the Korean designers that I've seen while being here, I think they, perhaps even if they were educated in the West, they go to school in Europe or the US, there's still a touch of Korean tradition and a Korean sensibility that I think even myself, as someone who, is always looking for inspiration, I think I always looked for inspiration outside, where I traveled the world, when there's so much inspiration that we can get a well of it, within our own experience and our own cultures, and the things that are just immediately around us and in our homes.
This is a really good question. So there is a big 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗡𝗙 show at Bunna Shop. It's really hard to see the works of 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗡𝗙 in Thailand. It's really hard. You guys will have 𝗗𝗘𝗙𝗡𝗙 𝗓𝗃𝗡𝗙 is doing a performance at Sogang University. That piece, unless someone comes in and funds the piece, we'll never get to see it in Thailand. So our artists thrive abroad, and they always kind of have. I think it's a matter of the ecosystem that lends itself, that's outside of Thailand, that exists in Europe, that exists in America. So that's something that we need to work on. I think it's being able to show frequently, to be able to have more people access the work. That's why the biennales are important. We don't have an art fair in Thailand, but that's why having this fair is important. I think being in a place where one can connect the kind of beauty, philosophical, intellectual aspect of what the piece does to you, where you can also see it in an exhibition in a marketplace, I think is really important. And I think what's missing, I think about it often because, Philip and I have a brand, but we are an American brand, so we have an American market. But ultimately what we're doing is we function as a platform for artisans in Thailand right now, but hopefully we can use the model to apply it to the rest of Southeast Asia and other communities that make things with their hands. But it's about the marketplace. It's about having it available. And until I think we collaborate more in depth within our region, across our region, to be able to create again, it's not just about getting grants and like living off grants. It's how do you make a living? How do you make a livelihood from it? It's very hard to be a commercially successful Thai designer because our market simply is not big enough. And the market, that's actually not true. We have a huge market, but our market likes imported things. So, you know, the atelier of someone in the northeast of Thailand who's a master weaver, you know, typically who is weaving in the same way that someone from Rajasthan, they've just had their work in Dior, for example. How do we give them as much value? And again, I think it's like, you know, I don't think it's like it's a forceful shake. I think it just takes time.
네, 맞습니다. 한순간에 해결될 문제는 아니라고 생각되지만은요, 디자이너 자체 그리고 디자이너 기관들 그리고 런티파인 같은 플랫폼들을 통해서 우리 스스로가 더 많은 기회를 만들어내고 사람들과 더 많이 만날 수 있는 접점들을 만들어내는 것이 굉장히 중요하다라는 생각을 다시 한번 하게 되었습니다. 닥터 초만께서도 나중에 한국 디자이너나 한국 아티스트들과도 작업할 수 있는 기회가 또 생겼으면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 또 질리안 초이님 같은 분께서도 한국의 디자이너들과 작가분들을 또 미국에 소개하는 그런 역할을 더 많이 해주시기를 바라겠습니다. 저 그러면은 시간이 얼마 남지 않았는데 혹시 지금 얘기를 들으시면서 혹시 궁금하신 점들이 혹시 있으셨을까요? 저희 질문을 좀 몇 개, 두 개 정도만 받아보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 질문이 없으면 제가 하나 질문을 더 하도록 하겠습니다. 특히 저는 닥터 초만께서 만드시고 계시는 그 브랜드가 너무 매력적이라는 생각이 들어요. 공예라는 그리고 지역성이라는 키워드를 가지고 뉴욕 베이스로 브랜드를 만들고 있죠. 보통은 로컬 브랜드라는 어떠한 선입견을 깨고 뉴욕 브랜드를 만드시고 계시는데요. 이 세계가 동시대 아시아 디자인을 이해하도록 하려면 우리가 어떤 노력을 해야 될지에 대한 질문을 좀 드리고 싶습니다. 네.
Okay. Yeah, I understood. What kind of efforts do we have to make? I think we have to tell the stories. We have to tell the stories without reducing the complexity. We have to find a way to, I think the theme of this show, Define Soul, is a look within matter. How do we communicate the complexity of our processes, our histories, our joint histories, our diverse histories, stories, without simplifying it to cater to an audience who typically they don't understand yet because they don't have what we have over here. And the assumptions that we make that they understand. I remember a funny story is we use tamarind to feed the indigo vat. It's what it eats. I remember a dear friend of mine pointed to a picture of a mangosteen and said, "This is a tamarind." I said, "Oh, that's so sweet." It's not, but he wouldn't, how would he know? Right? Because tamarinds don't grow in the West. So I think it's actually finding a way to simplify how we tell stories to preserve their complexity. And I think it's through art, design, film, music, you know, and overall collaboration.
네, 너무 또 좋은 말씀을 해주신 것 같습니다. 아까에 해주셨던 얘기가 좀 일맥상통하는 것 같은데요. 다양한 도구를 통해서 스토리를 얘기하고, 스토리라는 것은 어떻게 보면 우리에게 감성적으로 우리의 마음을 열어주는 도구가 되어주기도 하죠. 그렇게 다양한 이야기들을 감성적으로 하는 것이 중요한 방법이 될 것 같습니다. 사실 우리가 가진 것들은 정말 좋은 것들이 너무 많죠. 우리인데 그것을 어떻게 우리가 각색하고 아름답게 잘 포장해서 딜리버 할 것인가는 또 우리에게 또 굉장히 중요한 과제로 다가오는 것 같습니다. 그럼 오늘 이렇게 함께 해주신 두 분께 다시 한번 큰 박수 좀 부탁드리고요. 이것으로 오늘의 세션을 마치도록 하겠습니다. 너무 감사합니다.